Good afternoon and welcome to Pittsburgh City Council's public hearing regarding interviews for the PWSA Board. Madam Clerk, will you please read the purpose of the hearing or the meeting?
Council Bill 1306, resolution appointing Mark Anthony Thomas as a member of the Board of Directors for the PWSA Authority for a term to expire January 4th, 2026. Mr. Thomas will be serving in a seat that had been vacant. Bill number 1307, resolution appointing Margaret Peg McCormick Barron as a member of the Board of Directors for the PWSA Authority for a term to expire January 5th, 2025. Mrs. McCormick Barron will be serving in a seat that had been held by Margaret Lanier, who has retired. Bill number 1308, resolution appointing Alex Shuley as a member of the Board of Directors for the PWSA Authority for a term to expire January 4th, 2026. Mr. Shuley will be serving in a seat that had been held by Paul Lager, who has retired.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And Mr. Legger, you would like to introduce the nominees?
Thank you, Madam President. First,
Introduce
let me
yourself,
talk.
please.
Oh, thank you. I am Paul Lager. I am the chair of the board of the PWSA. And my purpose here today is to explain how these three people got here and who they are. We have a new method of appointing people to the board, and it involves an outside independent committee headed by Mark Nordenberg, who makes recommendations to the mayor. The mayor chooses to recognize those recommendations, which he did, and sends them over to council. Council then approves or disapproves. And the three nominees that have been sent this time are Alex Shuley, Peg McCormick Barron, and Mark Thomas. Each of them fills a unique place on the board of expertise, which we don't have at present. In the old days, this was a board filled by appointees who had no necessary knowledge of how water departments were run or of any particular aspect of the board. But these three people fill very specific slots. Alex Shuley is currently a consultant to the PWSA. His consultancy will end at the end of March, and he would, if appointed, become a board member. He is uniquely qualified because he knows our capital program and our engineering very well, and our current executive director is not an engineer. So this takes the engineering portion of the job and puts it in the hands of the board. Peg McCormick Barron served in the Murphy administration. That's what she's probably best known to some members as doing. However, she's done much more than that. And she's been on the boards of many, many nonprofits and has great expertise in intergovernmental relationships, which we don't have. And that's something that the board could use very necessarily, because we need to have better relations with the state and the federal government. And finally, Mark Thomas is urgently needed because he is the Chief Executive Officer of the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance under the Allegheny Conference. And we don't have a business representative on the board. And Mark gives us that kind of representation for the first time. So now we have a business representative, a government affairs and nonprofits representative, an engineering representative, and for the first time, we got a water expert on the board in Mike Domack from CMU, who is not one of these three. He was the previous three appointed. Now, that sort of sets the stage for you to ask questions, and I will recede into the vapors of time and go away, and I promise never to be back again. I know I've said that many times.
I think I heard that before, but okay.
Yes, you've heard that before, and it keeps happening. Thank you very much for your indulgence, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Director Lager. I just want to thank you for your service to the city of Pittsburgh. Every time that you think you're going to retire and the city of Pittsburgh needs you, you come back to help. So I do want to thank you. You hold you in high regard, and I think you know that, but I'm still going to give you a hard time about PWSA. Thank
course.
you. Thank you. And with that said, we are joined by Councilwoman Gross, who was a former board member of PWSA. We're joined by Councilman Wilson and Councilman Lavelle. Any other members? I think that's it. So with that said, I'm going to open it up to members. Do we have any? And we'll start with Councilman Wilson since he was here first.
Oh, thank you. I know I've had some conversations and everyone comes highly recommended. I just want to ask everyone a blanket question, which is, what are the top 2 challenges that you see PWSA faces in the next 5 years? So whoever would like to begin.
Well, I'll begin, Councilman. There's a lot of challenges for PWSA. PWSA has made remarkable progress in the last few years, but has a lot of challenges ahead. Paul mentioned one of them, and that is the capital improvement program. The ability to basically fund our infrastructure, which has been neglected financially for some time, and getting that up to speed is a big lift. And trying to do that while you're flying the airplane and still operating are the major challenges in my mind. And of course, the second thing is affordability for the ratepayers. This is a huge undertaking that will cost the ratepayers significant amount of money. And that is an education process that the ratepayers need to understand and buy into to keep their water product at a very high quality. So those are the overarching things for me.
If I could, I want to make a comment because I know, in terms of infrastructure, I know a lot of us are thinking about the lead lines, but in reality, a lot of this infrastructure with the sewer pipes or the stormwater pipes is a big challenge because, recently with Riverview Park and all of the different landslides that have occurred there, my concern is that we really don't have a good hand. One of the concerns that I have is that, we really need to understand, are all the stormwater pipes and sewer pipes that are running through that park, can we get a thorough check on all those pipes and if repairs need to be made, that's gonna, what's that figure? So what are can you expand and let me know if you're already aware of, or maybe Chairman Lager could elaborate, but I'm familiar with the investment in the lead lines, but what about the investment in the stormwater pipes?
Well, Paul, I can handle that if you want me to talk about that.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think you covered, Councilman, the lead lines where, we've made significant progress by replacing a lot of the lead lines, and we're also well ahead of where the DEP has asked us in terms of the number of homes. And of course, PWSA has taken on both the public side of the lead lines and the private side of the lead lines and has made considerable progress. And I'm sure you know that our testing for lead has been increased, and we're happy to report that we're well below the threshold, the federal threshold for lead contamination. And in fact, we're providing expertise to many municipalities around the country who want to follow and mimic our program on what we've done with lead lines. In terms of sewer lines have been a little bit of the stepchild at PWSA for quite some time because a lot of the focus has been on water. But if you look at the capital improvement program, you'll see that there's a tremendous amount of investment that's going on right now on sewer lines around the city of Pittsburgh. Stormwater is a completely different animal. No one really is responsible for stormwater directly, and PWSA is taking a very strong leadership position to lead the effort with stormwater. But of course, we share this responsibility not only with the city of Pittsburgh, but we share it with Alcoasand. And at the board meeting coming up here in March, this Friday, the board will be voting on a stormwater master plan. We put out a RFP for solicitation for professional services. We had a tremendous amount of response. We had, I think, 183 firms around the country. We advertised nationally for this assignment. We reviewed the proposals. We shortlisted the 4, and we are planning to make an award at the March board meeting that will help us basically set the plan for stormwater in the next 20, 30, 40 years, but certainly, putting the plan together of what's important in the next few years.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely specifically interested in the stormwater pipe and the investment there. But thank you for elaborating on that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilman Wilson, are you done?
If the others could talk about
Okay.
the challenges that they see.
I'd be happy to tackle that.
Thank you.
Sure. As with any board that I've joined in the last number of years, I have a lot to learn, and I'm very eager to learn that. I think, the capital needs, I think, are ever present and certainly are a priority, and Alex has really articulated those needs. I have a particular interest in ensuring that the really high quality customer service that has developed at PWSA continues. So for me, that's a very important issue. And I know that there are a lot of other things that I will need to learn and that will all be on the priority list should I move forward in this process.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy to weigh in as well. I've been in Pittsburgh for less than 2 years. And so my perspective obviously would be a fresh newcomer. That said, I have worked pretty closely with other cities in these types of governance issues, which is something I'm a strong believer in, effective kind of management across the public sector. And so I want to use the next few months to really learn what are those challenges and be able to provide at least my own expertise and insight to make sure that we're on the right path and it's something that you all will feel comfortable with.
Okay. Well, thank you all for your time. I'm gonna let go of my time and let others ask questions. Thank you all for your time, and I really appreciate your willingness to serve.
Thank you, Councilman Wilson. If you have second round, we'll come back. Councilwoman Gross and then Councilman Lavelle.
Thank you, Madam President. I was just kind of scanning the participants to see what council members we had here. Thank you all for your interest in serving the public. I am very familiar with each of you and your fine work and contributions through many years of service to the community and to the city of Pittsburgh especially. And Mr. Thomas, even though you're a newcomer, we appreciate your service to the city as well. Just for full disclosure, while I was serving on the board, Mr. Shuley was consulting to us as well as Alcoasand, if I recollect, right?
Yes.
And so he's got deep experience having served as in the city's water department when it was still a water department. Maybe you want to speak a little bit to your role there, since it was the water department. It hasn't been the water department since 1985-ish.
Right. Yeah.
To the beginnings. You were there
Yeah.
at the beginning time.
Well, I guess I'm showing my age, Councilwoman. But yeah, when I first came to the city, I spent 10 years in city government. I had several positions, including city engineer, and became the director of the city water department when it was a water department. PWSA at that time was formed, but it was mostly a financial organization that was focusing on revenue bonds. And in addition to my tenure as a director of the city water department, I was also the director of the city engineering construction department. And for a while, I also served as the interim director of public works. So I have a lot of familiarity with city government and the departments. And when the authority, when PWSA moved into a full operating authority by taking the folks from the water department and public works and making them a fully operating authority, I had some various stints within PWSA on assignments, and had continued that over a period of years, but I'm very much looking forward to moving to the board level.
So it's one of the kind of history lessons I think that bears just repeating, because these things were a long time ago, right? That in 1985, when City Council created PWSA as an authority, it was just, as you say, was basically a financial vehicle.
Right.
And that was some years later when operations actually moved, meaning people, right? That
Right.
ran the authority actually moved as from being city authorities to being authority, the city employees to being PWSA employees, and physically moved out of the building, right? And so operations and the lease, I'm assuming, kind of shifted at that time, so that the authority leases the infrastructure from the city, but the city and the people of the city of Pittsburgh still own all of their infrastructure that they have paid to build.
That's
The
correct.
water plant, the sewer lines, to the water lines, et cetera. And so that is why we have to kind of, I think, it's our responsibility as the city council of the city of Pittsburgh to keep these conversations in public. And so I will always remind us of that, because I have fought so ardently to keep the authority as a public authority, and to keep the water system publicly owned. And so I just like to take any opportunity I can to repeat my commitment there. And I would like to ask you about your commitment to keeping the water system that the citizens of the city of Pittsburgh built and have paid for with every dime of their water bills over these many decades. What is your commitment to keeping the water system public?
Well, I'll begin, and I think you ought to hear from Peg and Mark as well, but I'm very much in favor of keeping it a public system. I have had the opportunity to see other systems that have been privatized, including parts of Pennsylvania American, which serve a portion of the city of Pittsburgh. And I believe that the simple fact that every dollar we collect as a public system goes back into the system for improvement, not for profit. And I am, as long as I am associated with the board, I am going to be fighting with you, Councilwoman, to make sure that our system does stay public.
And since this is an interview for three board members from PWSA, I'll just take another minute to say that when I was elected to the board, appointed to the board by the mayor and ratified by city council, the entire operating, or top of the operating chart, right, of employees of PWSA were direct employees of Veolia Corporation, the largest water corporation on the planet. And so I will further ask, what is your commitment to keeping the operations of PWSA and not just the pipes publicly owned and operated?
Yes, I agree. Well, we're very happy that we have moved on from Veolia. And quite frankly, as you know, Councilwoman, we have added to our staff in terms of talent. And quite frankly, I've said this to many folks in my long association with the water department and PWSA, that I believe the staff now is perhaps the most talented staff that we've had at PWSA over a long period of time. And I'm also aware that we're making some other strategic hires. Because of the progress that PWSA has made, there are folks out there who want to be part of this. They want to be part of the new progress that's happening in PWSA. For a long time, we had a difficult time recruiting people, but now people are seeing the progress that we've made. And obviously, Councilwoman, you were a part of that progress being on the board. We're getting people who want to be a part of this, that want to make a contribution. And so our talent level has moved way up. And of course, as you know, as the talent moves up, the management improves and the system will improve and continue to improve.
Thank you. And I will also give Chairman Paul Legger much of the credit there as well. We, as a board, fired Veolia, sued Veolia for ruining our billing system, for ruining our water quality. And he put in many hours in pursuing the turnaround at the authority. And I just want to applaud him for that, because I agree. I am very impressed by the caliber in the executive team at PWSA right now. And that is a big difference from when I felt that I wasn't even getting the truth from members of the executive team. Those are very trying times. So I will acknowledge that. If before I let you go and I talk to the other nominees, though, I just I wrote down, and maybe we can follow up separately, or I could talk to other current board members. I noticed that you mentioned the stormwater master plan has been RFP'd, but we've had other stormwater plans. We've had consultants under contract for my entire term, it felt like, or at least the last 3 or 4 years of the term, in creating, pricing out all of the ideas for stormwater utility. We've had a Green First plan. Councilman Wilson's sewer shed, his district is mostly under one sewer shed. I'm going to forget which one that is. The A40, no, mine's the A41, his might be the A29 or something like that. That is, it was studied at a micrograin level on every square foot of where to put cisterns, or where not to put cisterns, where to put, rain gardens, where not to put rain gardens. And similarly in my district, so there were 3 that were focused on an extremely tight level, right? Including the A41 in my district, and I think the A22, and maybe another one. And we had a post agenda here at council back in 2017 about that. And so what I don't understand, and maybe just a few seconds here, and we can follow up afterwards. So what is this? What is left to study?
Yeah, I'm happy to tell you, because Paul can tell you, I was the primary author of this RFP. And although we have pieces and parts, we have obviously consultants that have worked on green infrastructure. We rolled out the Green First plan in 2016. We are looking to move to a stormwater fee that you're very much aware of, and hopefully in 2022, we hired consultants for that. But it's like a big puzzle. But we never had the framework. We didn't have the framework putting all these pieces together. And one of the reasons why the master plan is so needed is because a couple of things have changed. The first thing that's changed, of course, is Alcosan received approval for their consent decree. And when that consent decree became public, Alcosan's going to spend on their consent order, and so that we're fair to the ratepayers and we don't duplicate work out there, we need to have a closer collaboration between Alcosan and PWSA, and that's going on regularly. We have monthly meetings, sometimes bi-weekly meetings. That's the first thing. The second thing is that PWSA has begun negotiations on their own consent decree. We've had our kickoff meeting with EPA, DOJ, and our consent decree will be a little bit different than Alcosan's. Alcosan's was mostly focused on combined sewer overflows from a regulatory perspective. We will have that and much more. We will have flooding in the streets. We will have basement backups. We'll have lots of things that will need to be addressed. And so therefore, we needed the stormwater master plan to bring all these somewhat related pieces together and bring them under a coherent plan that everybody can work collaboratively together and work toward a goal of the stormwater management that we so badly need.
There's probably music to most council members' ears. I've got flooding basements even at the top of Stanton Heights on high ground. And, we're still trying to figure out why. I'm just reviewing it this morning with a paving plan saying, should we pave that street or should we not pave that street? Because everybody on the streets basements have been flooding, right? And so I was digging into 6 years of 311 calls and constituent complaints, trying to figure out whether utilities had coordinated and fixed problems before we go out and send a paving truck. And then what I don't want to hear is that you just paved my street and now the flooding's even worse, or you didn't fix the flooding problem before you paved my street and you hadn't paved my street in 40 years. And now people say PWSA or someone else is going to come tear it up, right? Which is, but when you're talking about saving dollars, you're talking about spending billions of dollars. You don't
Correct.
want to pay for your street on your gas bill and on your city property tax bill and on your PWSA water bill, because it's been not coordinated and you've seen construction on your street 3 times in a row, which means you've triple paid, right? And it's not cheap. It's extraordinarily expensive for any of us to pay for opening those streets and reconstructing those streets. So
Right. I agree.
it's not going to be easy. And I just always like to remind the public that a lot of that stuff into the street is 100+ years old. And we know it needs to be fixed. And that's
Right.
why your street keeps collapsing. And that's why possibly, there's grading that needs to be redone. And we know we need to rebuild them, and we're building, we're not maintaining, as I always like to emphasize. So now I don't want to take too much time, Madam President. I'm not going to go on too much of a tangent. I could talk
No,
about
no,
stuff
please
all
take
day
your time.
long, but we're building a system for the next 100 years. We built it 100 years ago, and now we're building a new system. And so there are a lot of decisions that will need to be made and prioritizations that will need to be made. And it will be your job as board members to do that. And yes, it is a steep learning curve, but I know that you're up to the task. So Mr. Shilley, I'll leave you off the hook here, and I'll say hello to Ms. McCormick Barron, who is always wonderful to see.
Thank you. Just call me Peg.
Peg, thank you. It's we all know Peg for many, many hats that she has worn. And she gets credit, I think, for being at River Life most recently while we redid our zoning code to reflect the very different uses that we have on our riverfronts compared to when they were lined with steel mills.
Right.
And that those assets were long gone, and yet we really hadn't changed our way of doing business to have a vision for what they could be, and then to align like all of the pieces to make that vision happen. So it's wonderful to see you here, and certainly your government experience, wearing many different hats at different levels of government, is relevant here. But probably also your understanding of how water is an asset.
Yes.
Right, especially for a city, especially in these changing times where having access to water intake from the rivers is probably one of PWSA's greatest assets. That we have the permit to withdraw the water, right, from this magnificent water source that we're lucky to have. We have to fight to keep it clean, and we have to fight to keep it a great source for the city. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your perspective, Peg, coming out of public affairs and government relations, and then I'm not going to let you out of answering the hard questions about your commitment to keeping the water system public, but also to keeping operations public.
I'll answer that up front. Thank you. I am in full agreement with Alex. These are important public resources as well as authorities, and should be maintained and such. And I think they're important. They provide an important opportunity to make sure that the water that we all enjoy every day for various purposes, whether it is recreational or for drinking or for bathing or whatever we need to do, I think it's important, while there may be private involvement through various consultants, such as fine people like Alex, the ownership is really important for those who pay for it. So I agree on that front. as I said earlier, I have a lot to learn. I've joined a lot of new organizations over my lifetime in my working career, and each one has been a little bit foreign and new. This one I have some familiarity with from my time in the city, and I look forward to the learning. I hope that I bring some skills in understanding some of how various government levels work together or don't, and what the reasons are and how we might approach them. My time at River Life certainly drove home, and I feel very committed to the importance of our rivers as assets for lots of reasons. And as you suggest, Councilwoman, we use them differently now. And a lot more people have access to the rivers now. There was a former mayor who used to talk about his mother admonishing him not to go in the river. And I heard it a million times, so I should know it off by heart, but that was the gist of it. But now we know that we actually can approach the river and use the river and enjoy it, all the rivers. So I hope that I've answered your questions and told you a little bit more about my background. So
Thank you. I'm kind of scrolling through. I do have your resume up, and just for the public, these of course are attached to the legislative record. So you can click through on Legistar and see them. I think you mentioned there are many multiple levels of government that are relevant to running the water system. One of the main ones that is still confused, it's still in front of City Council now, and we've been going back and forth on it. It's just like approving sewer modules for major developments. And like, why is it so confusing? And we've been doing it one way for 5 or 6 years, and then the last year it's changed. I'm not asking you to answer that now, but it's just an example of like, we had to go back to reading state law again and saying, which way are we supposed to be doing it? What level of approval does DEP have? When does City Council come in or not come in, and why? And so again, just another question that we can all work through together, I think, as we move forward, because it needs to have appropriate public process. And, I'll just reiterate, like, I'm a firm believer in public input on these issues, but it should not be obtuse. That's not helpful there shouldn't be a lack of transparency about how the process is supposed to happen. It's just, that's not good for anybody. So I'll leave that be, and I think that is something that we can all work on. So Mr. Thomas, I'll welcome you as well, and thank you for your time and for your interest in serving with PWSA. You mentioned that you think that it's important to have a good business relationship for PWSA. Maybe you could speak to what you mean by that for a minute, and then also speak to your commitment to keeping the system and operations of public.
Yeah, so I'll follow Peg's cadence and first reassure my commitment. When I mentioned that I'm a strong believer in good public governance, most of my career has been where business has helped public sector be more efficient, try innovative ideas, but never kind of replacing the role that the public sector plays. And so I have had the pleasure being from Atlanta in my early career working with the Atlanta Water Authority on some of their infrastructure work. And then in my time in Los Angeles working with their public authority, which is the largest in the country on real estate and economic development related issues. And so what I meant by having a good business relationship is authorities have a lot of power in just their procurement and what they spend to create local jobs and create local opportunity. And so I look forward to really learning more about what we currently do and how do we catalyze as much opportunity as possible. And second, in serving developers and businesses, how do we make sure that we're a good partner and predictable and providing the services that we're set up to provide. I will say that in taking this role, in moving here. My goal was to be a Pittsburgher first, and then be civically involved in all the ways that I think I contribute. And that my economic development work is really secondary to really wanting to contribute to just the overall success of the city.
Thank you for that. There certainly is a lot of ways I think that business is dependent on our water and sewer system. And yet when we're looking at all of the, we have massive amounts of real estate development right now, right? And so
Yeah.
massive, probably more than any time in the city's history. And what I keep reminding people when I say we're building a system, we're not maintaining a system. One of the things that I will confess to advocating for it at the board level at PWSA was quintupling the cost of the sewer tap-ins, much to the chagrin of Councilwoman Smith's small business who was trying to expand in her district at the time, and we had to work through that. And I think there's a much better work to be done on creating a more nuanced policy around those things that can not discourage small business and yet still capture the right amount of fees from the bigger developers who are creating more strain on the system. When we had all the steel mills down at the riverfront, that's when we had, our water infrastructure goes to the riverfront as well, right? The massive water mains and the massive sewer mains. But we have massive development sometimes creating large demands where the system isn't that strong now. And so they're needing bigger water demand and bigger, in Oakland and other places, big water demand and big sewer demand where the system wasn't built there. And so we're really having to make sure that we have developments secure the lines, right? It's not like you just get to plug into the line. When you're tapping in, it's really not a tap in. It's more like you're building on a green field and the municipality is requiring you to put in like a mile of sewer and a mile of water because you're plopping down someplace where there is no system, certainly not to support the level of development where you are. And I just like to take advantage of the opportunity to paint that picture for people because it is sometimes surprising to people that it's so difficult to make sure that we're matching, our who's paying and who's using the system. And I've had this conversation back and forth with PUC, right? I don't think they're understanding the fact that we're not talking about maintenance fees here. We're talking about literally, it's almost like construction fees. So I personally think of them more as impact fees. But that's another conversation for another day. I am confident in all of your leadership. I'll just close, Madam President, by saying that I arm wrestled last week about whether or not that there is a slot on PWSA for you at this time. It's not that I doubt any one of the strengths of your perspectives or backgrounds, but that PWSA may not increase the size of its own board. And may not just bring forward nominations to the board for which there are not slots. And so it looks like our reading of the state chapter 5605, I was kind of accurately reading it. And so there will be, I think, a separate conversation. And again, nothing against any of your backgrounds or willingness to serve. But I'm actually not convinced that PWSA should have more than 7 members either. That is a discussion unto itself. Each one of our authorities has either 5 or 7 members. I am not aware of any public authority that has more than 7 in the city of Pittsburgh. And I don't think that our authorities should behave like private corporations. I serve on the board of the Carnegie Library. It used to be a city department and now it's a private corporation, a nonprofit corporation, but still a private corporation. It's got something like 50 members on the board. It seems like it's at least 30. Similarly, I've been on elected to the zoo board. It's entirely in my district. It used to be a city department, but it is not a city department nor an authority anymore. It is a private corporation and it's responsible for its own, it has its own fiduciary responsibility in a different way and less truthfully, less accountability to the public. The public does not attend its board meetings. City council members do not approve its board. And, and it's got some couple of dozen members. And I think that there is a different style of board for authorities than for private corporations. So I'll just stop there, Madam Clerk. You know my opinions, so I don't need to tell them to you. That's all I have now. Thank you all. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. And we don't have any other members, correct? We did have Councilman Lavelle, but I know that he had to sign off as the interviews were going on. I actually have a lot of questions. Mostly, I want to talk a little bit about what Councilman Gross touched upon with the business tap-in fees. I know that when she was on the board and she voted for that, she was trying to address the issues with the larger businesses. But what I've noticed is that we've had a really significant effect and impact negatively on small businesses. And what I know that I was successful. I talked to actually Chief of Staff Gilman and the director and Councilwoman Strasburger, and I asked them if they would do something, a payment plan for the small businesses. But I'd really want that whole process to be reviewed because it is really having a negative effect. And I'd like to see, ask each one of you how you feel about that and I'm really happy to see that there is somebody from the businesses represented on this. But so I'll start with you. And if you could just talk about what you think that you could bring to the board that will advocate for small business and large businesses, but mostly small businesses, because that's where we're seeing a lot of impact. We actually have a fundraiser going on right now for a business trying to open in my district, and it's due to the PWSA tap-in fees, which they had the money up until then. And they were just too astronomical, even with payment plan. So could we start with Mark, please?
Sure. So this one areas I want to dive in immediately if I were appointed, just to really understand what is the full weight on small businesses. I'm a strong believer in entrepreneurship and us creating really the type of city that we want requires equity across all of our governance structures. And so when I say that I'm a big advocate of that, I mean that wholeheartedly. And so really being able to dive in, understand what is the current infrastructure, and then how do we make it better and more fair for the small businesses will be key. With bigger developments, obviously, they just have a lot of infrastructure around their ability to move development projects. So they can obviously hire lobbyists and hire the right people to make their projects work. And so that's not a fair environment. And so one of my first orders would be, how do we create the right playing field so that we can see not just big development growth, but equitable growth among our small businesses as well.
Thank you. And I just want to say, I don't want to not help large businesses because I think that we need a little bit of everybody and everything. I'm not anti anybody. I just want to figure out how we can all work together to do what's best for the city as a whole and our residents. And some of those small businesses, really serve a huge purpose in our districts, in our neighborhoods. There are main streets, they're employing a lot of people, and they really struggled a lot through this pandemic. And then to have one open during a pandemic is amazing. We have several of them. Yeah, we have several of them wanting to open in our district, and we're so excited about them. But the one that really is struggling is due to tap-in fees. And I actually got involved more than once now with tap-in fees. And I'm getting like a little bit more than perturbed, to be honest with you. I'm happy that that the mayor's office and Councilwoman Strasburger and the director heard my concerns about the impact it's having to small businesses and came up with a structure for a payment plan, and the board voted for it. So I'm very thankful to everyone, but it has to be much more than just a payment plan because it's just not a level playing field, and it's not fair. So I really want to see that addressed.
Okay.
I don't know if Peg, if you want to mention, respond to.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a really important issue about this city that it's comprised of all these neighborhoods that we all love and the small businesses that make them up. I live on the south side and I walk on the south side most days, and my heart sort of breaks for the number of businesses that have closed. I don't know the circumstances around tap-in fees. I will admit I need to be educated more about that, but I recognize that there's a whole collection of issues that small business people confront in order to be successful, to open, to stay open, to thrive, and to serve the neighborhoods that want them. So I would be very interested in learning more about this, and trying to work with you and others to make sure that that sector of our community has a equal footing and ability to grow and employ people, as well as serve the communities. I'm sorry, we lost your audio.
Sorry, my phone was beeping, it was muting me.
Technology.
But yeah, Alex, yeah. Alex, I just want to say the Shuley family and the Kell family go way back. And I actually did a proclamation for your family not too long ago. But I still have a lot of concerns. So I really want to talk with you, but I hear your knowledge, and it's making me feel a little bit, everybody said that how great you would be to serve on this board. So I'm feeling a little bit more confident in that. But I want to know about these tap-in fees, and there's a couple other things that I'd like to talk to you about.
Sure. Well, as you know, the Shuley family is, there's lots of Shuleys in Pittsburgh. We're several columns in the phone book. So, but we're a prolific family. But I think you're right, Councilwoman. I do think this process needs revisited. Based on my tenure and longstanding relationship, this is a very important aspect. Any fees that are assessed by PWSA cannot be arbitrary and capricious, just can't be what it was before. There has to be some rationale for what those fees are, and there has to be some accountability of why the fees are being assessed, what costs are being covered. As you know, even when you make a tap into the main for businesses and so forth, there is a cost involved. And so that cost has to be allocated so that ratepayers are not all paying for someone else's work. So I do think the process needs revisited in terms of trying to make it as transparent as possible as to why fees are assessed and how is the fee assessed in terms of the cost that's actually incurred. So I do think that's something as board members and folks like Mark and Peg, who have a lot of experience here, I think will be very, very helpful in trying to add to that conversation and how the policy should be revised.
Okay, thank you. So I'm looking forward to, I'm going to check back with you all if you're appointed, if your appointees are approved, but I want to know what you're doing in this area, and I want to know quickly. I don't want to hear that it's going to take another year. And speaking of things taking a very long time, we have an issue in Banksville that every time PWCA comes to the table for the past maybe 3-4 years, I don't even know how long it's been, to be honest with you. It's been a very long time. I ask about Banksville and the flooding that's been occurring in Banksville. And it makes me sick. It's unconscionable that this has gone on for so long. I know the director's supposed to be looking into it again, but I don't want to hear any more about you looking into it. I don't want to hear any more about a report. I don't want to hear any more about what you think might be the problem. I want to hear what you're going to do that's going to actually resolve the issue in Banksville. And it's not unique to Banksville. There's also issues similar across the city, but there's been time and time again where Banksville residents were promised things about the flooding. And I want to first, Mark, Alex, you're probably the most familiar with it. But when you talk about green infrastructure, I've heard a lot about the city of Pittsburgh. And to be honest with you, when I was so excited about green infrastructure, and when I was on the LCM board, I actually brought it up to the executive director, Arletta, about doing more green versus gray. But then I started looking into this issue with Banksville, and Pittsburgh does not always seem like to be the perfect place for green infrastructure. So I'm concerned that when we look into green infrastructure, we're putting people and residents in jeopardy because we're not doing it right. And I know that since then they've done some things differently. Could you talk a little bit about the engineering part of this? Because that's the part I'm the most interested in is the, well, I should say I'm not, but it's a part I'm very extremely interested in. And I want to make sure that our residents, I'll be honest with you, I don't even know if I'm going to hold the interviews for a vote until this issue is resolved, because it's been that ridiculous. I want something. I want the residents of Banksville to have an answer. Could you talk a little bit about it, Mark, and what you think, or I'm sorry, Alex, and what you think might be a solution there if you know one, since you are an engineer. And I mean, to me, to hear that the executive director who lives in my district is not an engineer, and that's why we need an engineer on board. Well, there should be an engineer on staff that can address some of these questions and concerns. So it's great to have you as a board member, as an engineer, but it'd be great to have a lot of engineers on staff as well. So could you talk about that?
Right. Well, I think we could probably talk for hours about the benefits of green and gray infrastructure, but if you're referring to Tayson, Red Oak, yes, I am familiar. That was not a project that I worked on directly, but I am familiar with the project. And I agree with you. It's gone on for a very long time, and the residents deserve an answer. Most of these projects, as you know, there's not one solution. You can't go into these neighborhoods and say, this can be fixed with green infrastructure, or this can be fixed solely with gray infrastructure. Most of the time it needs a hybrid analysis. And as you know, we've gone through horrific climate change in the last few years. I mean, last year was not so bad, thank God, with COVID, but the previous 2 years were the biggest rainfall years on record, significantly higher, where our annual rainfall was only 38 inches. In 2018, it was 58 inches. And if you look at what's happening in the Northeast, it's an incredible change, not only in the frequency of storms, but in the intensity of those storms. And we live in a very rugged terrain in Pittsburgh. We have a lot of hills and valleys. And as you know, these watersheds are very complicated in that water comes from outside of the neighborhoods and end up in a bowl or at the bottom of the valley. And I think that the solution for not only Red Oak and Hasten, but others, is to try to put these things in a solution that's not just one-sided. And that has to start with all kinds of things, not only gray infrastructure, green infrastructure, but in terms of what the city does in terms of curb and gutter. I'm sure you could walk right into that neighborhood and see that the curbs are not very high. Well, how does that water, it easily jumps over that curb and down people's driveways and into their basements. So it's not something that can be solved with just one tool in the toolbox. It has to be several tools. And this is one of the reasons why we have gone after this stormwater master plan. Too many neighborhoods have suffered. I'm one of the leads on 4 Mile Run and have worked on it over the last couple of years. And it's a terrific problem for those residents. They get basement backups. We have people who live in who work at PWSA or that live in the run and get flooded constantly. And so this is an issue that has been let dormant for many, many years. And I'm very happy that PWSA is going to take the leadership role. And in my role on the board, I'm going to try to help the engineering department and the executive team find the right solutions and do them in a cost-effective and quick manner, not just let's just throw some sandbags out there and then walk away. So I hear you. I know that this is a problem not only in Banksville, but in many neighborhoods throughout the city. And I do think that what's happening in terms of the changes in PWSA in terms of leadership and the actual design from the consultant side, that we will address these issues, hopefully in a time-sensitive manner.
And that's, well, time sensitive is still, but too late for some of them. So I just want to say, but I think that there's some conversation happening now with the director. And I mean, I think he's a really great guy. He's a really nice guy, but it doesn't matter how nice he is. I need a result. I need some results and some solutions for residents in my district that are flooding, including that long drawn out Banksville process. And I'm a little angry because, when Dan Deasy was the chairperson of PWSA, he put $800,000 in to fix that project, that flooding issue. And I put in $200,000 from the city, which was requested. So we worked together to have a solution, and it waited for years before anybody would even use that funding and come up with that solution. And then they finally come up with something, and it was much more cost effective, and they didn't need all the money we put aside. And this is what they came up with. And instead of fixing the problem, residents are flooding. If they just would have done what should have been done in the first place, they probably wouldn't be going through all this. And so to say I'm livid about it is putting it mildly. Believe me, I'm just trying to decide how I can use this to make sure I get my residents some help. And not just my residents, because it is happening across the city of Pittsburgh. And I realize it's a much larger issue, but these homes were beautiful. And these are people that are sane, firefighters, police officers, somebody works for the Attorney General's office, school teachers, people that give of themselves every single day, can't come home and enjoy their homes, that our solution has made for some of them worse. So I'm going to continue to stay on that, and I'll probably call for a couple other things to make sure that we're addressing that. And I know that I don't know what the others, if you have anything to say to that, if you want to address that at all, the other two.
I can't say that I know enough about it. I think I understand the sequence that you're referring to, and I would appreciate Alex's further enlightenment about it, as well as the directress. But it sounds like a problem to be addressed in Banksville and in a lot of other neighborhoods.
Yeah, and it also affects our Banksville business district now.
Yes.
So it's affecting other things. And it was a strong business district, but it's not going to be strong if the city and state can't get their act together a little bit with some of these things. And then I would talk about when you talked about the board structure and the committee, and I'm sorry, Mr. Legger did, about an independent committee led by Mark Nortenberg, making recommendations for appointees. I want to know if, and I'll just say this, I think that they ought to start considering for every, and I remind the administration of this every chance I get, and they've actually been very good about it lately, is making sure that we have geographical representation, and not just everybody from one side of the city. That we need to make sure that there is representation on all boards and authorities from across the city of Pittsburgh. And I'm very excited because we are doing that in a lot of places. And the only reason I'm even entertaining this whole conversation today, and thinking about voting in favor, is because the director lives in our district. So I know we have some of the best representation right now, because it's good to have a director there. But I will say that I think that when we talk about board structure, that has to be part of what you look at. And I also think that everyday residents who are paying taxes, paying the rates, they need to be on these boards as well. Not everybody needs to be an expert. Some people need to be living it. And some people need to have the life experiences and the struggles of paying bills and doing those things. I'll just be honest, PWSA has been one of the board, I just cannot get over some of the things that go on there. And I do think that they're doing much better than they have been. I'm excited about some of the things that they're doing. And I will say, and I say this every chance I get, it was council that uncovered a lot of things that were happening. I scheduled a public hearing, a public hearing and 2 post agendas where we uncovered the meter issues, we uncovered the lead issues. And I hear people sometimes now making comments. I actually read something the other day, and I thought, no matter what, this is always going to be a political issue. But when it came time, when it was the initial time for us to start addressing these things, there were very few people that jumped on board and were ready to do some of the things that we needed to do. And the Women's Caucus asked for an investigation, and had it not been for that, I don't think anybody else would have even known. And once it started getting attention, I don't think anybody else would have known or paid attention that there was lead in the water, or that meters were broken, or that people were getting caught with astronomical bills. And I do have to say, I have to credit a lot of things that happened with my colleagues for what they brought to the table, but also to the administration, because I do think that the mayor, and especially Dan Gilman, has done a lot of listening to me, especially when I'm really, really cranky and really angry about something. And this PWSA issue is one of those issues. And so I want to thank both my colleagues and the administration for working together with the board to make some of the changes that we need to have changed in the area. But I'm still not certain I feel comfortable with this board, the nominees coming from outside, an outside group. I don't know who serves on that committee. I'd like to know who all serves on that committee. I'd like to know what their criteria is. Not everybody has to look good on paper. Some people just have to know what's going on in life and pay bills and struggle and to know what our residents are going through, or to worry about lead and water, or to worry about air, whatever it is that whatever the board is, whatever the commission is, we need to have people that have everyday life experiences that they can share and bring to the table. And with that said, I see that somebody's replacing Margaret Lanier Peg. Is that correct? And so what I'm wondering is, Margaret Lanier, is my understanding, maybe Councilman Gross might know more about this, or Director Lager, is that she was on as the treasurer, I thought. So that's,
I asked the same question and I'm not confident in the answer I got. The answer I got was that, oh no, neither the treasurer or finance director needs to be on the board, that's just been tradition.
okay, so, well, that's not what we were told. I think we can probably go back to another meeting and see that see the recording. But what I think we ought to do is look at that whole structure, and when it comes up for a conversation next week, then those are some of the things we're going to want to know is the positions you're replacing, were they supposed to be for those specific city employees, or is it okay to open them up to other people? And I'd like to know more about the criteria for the committee and how they're selecting people. But I'm going to continue to work on this Banksville issue and any flooding in my district, and I'm going to continue to raise concerns about the businesses and the tap-in fees, because they are serious concerns to me still. And that's it for me. Does anybody have anything they want to add, or Councilman Gross, second round?
I want to echo some of the things you said. I appreciate you spending time talking about equity in small businesses, because it wasn't something I was able to finish working on while I was on the board, and it's really important to my district as well. And I think there's definitely a better way to be doing it, while making sure that the big developments are paying their fair share, but making sure that we're not penalizing smaller businesses. And then also to speak to both the billing issue, the lead awareness issue, and the kind of infrastructure and flooding you've been talking about, Councilwoman. It's very often the people who have their ear to the ground, which is why I support having more public officials on the board. Some people will call that politics, but some people will call that actually walking the streets and talking to people and knowing what their street looks like, and knowing them and listening to them, right? And that the more public representation we have on the board of PWSA, the better, in my experience, having served there. I would have welcomed several council members on the board when I was serving, and not just one, even just in 7 seats, because I don't think there's anyone I know than the council members for each of their districts who know that on the ground infrastructure, where every alley is, where every flooding issue is, where every sidewalk is, where every community garden is. They literally know the square feet of their district better than anyone, because they walked it and they're taking the phone calls and complaints on it on a daily basis. And it's my experience, as you said, that the experts will tell you, like they told us, no, there's no billing problem. Your constituents don't know how to read their bills, which is literally something they told us repeatedly over the course of a year, which was absolutely wrong. And I remember saying, which one, the neuroscientist from CMU or the pensioner who's living on fixed income? Because they both have the same billing complaint.
Right.
So, and I'll stop there, but I concur. We need a lot of on the ground understanding, and not just outside consultants, especially. Right.
I agree. And I just want to thank you for your time you served on the board as well. And thank you all for your willingness to serve. Is there anything you'd like to say towards the end of the meeting? Clarify anything? You just want to get out of here, huh? But I'll just say, we're going to hold these appointments up until council determines whether or not to increase the size of the board. And so we'll have some discussion about that. We may even have a public hearing about that. So we'll see how this moves forward. So we don't need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.